I think that what this country, America, needs is an official curmudgeon. We have a poet laureate, I think, but we need an official curmudgeon. We had one once in H.L. Mencken, but I'm guessing a bit at that because I haven't read enough of him, and he was well before my time. The man I'm proposing as our official curmudgeon read Mencken extensively, enough to be called a student of the man, one of his intellectual progeny. I would suggest that for someone to be qualified to be an official curmudgeon, they would have to be mightily offended, not at being designated a curmudgeon, but at being called official. They would instinctively shy away from that tag. Real curmudgeons deplore officials of all sorts. See experts as windbags, authorities as entrenched stooges. My candidate certainly does that. I think he's still alive and living in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. What better place for a curmudgeon to settle? He is Paul Fussell, and if he is alive, he will have a chip on each shoulder, nicely balanced like epaulets, and he has earned them. I'll require 2 of these to cover him in all of his crotchety splendor, one for his military life and the other for his academic career. It doesn't matter, by the way, if he is alive or if you have heard of him. As a youth, Fussell was apathetic in body and mind. He was weak and flabby, and more to the point for a young man, he had tits. He would have done anything to avoid the group showers required by physical education classes, and to that end he joined ROTC. The marching in formation was no fun, but it beat exposing his humiliating body to the showers. The ROTC gig backfired big time, however, when he was drafted into the military as a combat infantryman. He lost his body fat, and therefore the offending breasts, in boot camp, and later learned that a comprehensive physical would have discovered previous exposure to the polio virus, resulting in certain infirmities that would have disqualified him from active duty. An ironist to the core, none of this escaped him. He saw his first action in the European theater in late 1944 and early 1945. The war was clearly winding down, but the Germans were still fighting, and war is war as long as it is being fought. People were still dying in large wartime numbers. Fussell was a lieutenant. One day he and his men came upon a dozen German soldiers, all young boys, all dead, all still holding their weapons, like a ghost squadron. He tried to see them as something beautiful, sculptural, as if Michelangelo had carved them, as a testament to war, but that didn't take, and he came away with nothing but horror. My boyish illusions, he wrote, largely intact to that moment of awakening, fell away all at once, and suddenly I knew that I was not and never would be in a world that was reasonable and just. He quotes the historian Stephen Ambrose. The most extreme experience a human being can go through is being a combat infantryman. And of that experience, he says, part of that involves, of course, intense fear, long continued, but another part requires a severe closing off of normal human sympathy, so that you can look dry-eyed and undisturbed at the most appalling things. For the naturally compassionate, this is profoundly painful, and it changes your life. Fussell contracted pneumonia, as he and his men were cruelly ill-equipped to withstand the intense winter cold. He notes that many soldiers died from exposure, illness, and infection. He was removed from battle and treated, then returned to the front. He soon learned that his reservoir of courage was greatly diminished. Each time it's called upon, he wrote, your bank account of bravery is expended, never to be regained. After several months, it's depleted, gone, and it's time for your breakdown. It's hard enough to be asked to die in the midst of heroes, he wrote, but to die in the midst of stumblebums led by fools, intolerable. And I include myself in this indictment. He and 2 other men were caught out in the open during an attack, and a shell burst over them. Fussell was wounded in the back and a leg. The other 2 men by his side were blown to pieces. They were all, of course, awarded posthumous battle ribbons, congratulated in Fussell's view for behaving like idiots, converted by the miracle of war from being substandard soldiers into brave young men who gave their lives for their country. Fussell quotes a British historian as saying, "War is the activity of man about which more lies are told than any other." That would begin with Homer and would continue with the latest report from the front. That marked the end of his time as a combat infantryman and the start of his life as a die-hard skeptic and cynical observer.